All right. I'm going to start at the verse.
And then we read it and translated it, but then we were in the middle of a discussion when we ran out of time.
All right.
I don't remember where.
I'm going to go back and just pick it up just right quick. In 1 Corinthians 6:1, the American Standard reads, "Dare any of you have a matter against his neighbor go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints." And so this is kind of a scolding or rebuke. You're kind of bold in doing this. The matter here against the neighbor, the word neighbor is heteron, and it's from heteros, someone of a different nature. So we're going to have to look later and see what this different nature is. Right? And it's translated neighbor in the King James, I think. Let me see. Before another, and the American Standard has neighbor. King James is better rendering here. Right? Something different about them here. Going to law is in the middle passive form. And so it can't be both middle and passive at the same time. It has to be either middle or passive. If it's passive, he's scolding or rebuking the ones who were being sued. If it's middle voice, he's rebuking the ones who are doing the suing. That makes perfectly good sense. It has to be one or the other, but it can't be both. So I'm convinced he's rebuking the one that's doing the suing.
Yeah, because the other guy didn't have any choice anyway.
Right.
He's
I think it
he's
has
at the
to
mercy
be.
of the
That's
suit.
why I've taken it as middle voice. Does that make sense? Why? That can't be both. It can't be both middle and passive at the same time. It has to be one or the other. And you go before unbelief, the unrighteous, and that's probably a synonym for non-Christians.
But he may be suing because the other guy owed him money or something.
Yeah. Whatever. We'll get to it later
Okay.
with what we see here. Actually, I think we can get with the choice of words, we can get some things that are going on here. We'll see this later. We'll develop a list of things that we can determine from this. We shouldn't make any conclusion until we finish verse 11. Then we can draw a conclusion about it. But notice here, he's scolding them and rebuking them for going before the righteous and not before the saints. There are some things that the church has no authority to decide. The church has no authority to decide some things that, such as a will. Jesus gave Caesar the right to make some certain decisions in some realms. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And so the probating of a will is a legal thing, and it's in the civil courts, for example. And so here, I think there has to be then, he is saying what is involved here could have been taken before the brethren. Am I making sense? The brethren can do some things, and so he's saying you went before the unrighteous, not before the saints. So if the saints could not have any authority in this matter and could not have decided, it wouldn't have been an option. So it has to be something the saints could have decided that's going on here. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And like probating a will, when my wife died, Cynthia, we had a trust, but all of the property she owned wasn't put in the trust, so we had to probate a will. There was a couple of pieces of property that weren't in there. She inherited from her parents. And so what we did is had to probate the will. And I asked the lawyer, I said, I'm suing the whole world, aren't I? He says, yes, you are. Because we send out a notice in the papers. If anybody can challenge this will, then they need to come forward at such and such time. Nobody came forward. But so he basically said, I sued the whole world. And nobody took up the gauntlet. And so he said, by default, I won. That's what he told me. And the lawyer's a member of the church. And he told me this. All right. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And of course, if you get a divorce from an unfaithful spouse, you probably have to go through court and do it. So I don't believe that all lawsuits are sinful, just some, certain ones. And here in this case, it would be a lawsuit that you shouldn't be doing if it's something the church could have handled. If the church has the authority to handle it, and I don't think they have the authority to probate a will, for example, like my wife's will, like Cynthia's will. So here, logically, we can say one of four things: either all going to law is prohibited, or some going to law is prohibited, or no going to law is prohibited, or some going to law is not prohibited. Those are only the four options from the standpoint of logical statements. It has to be one of those four. Here's our square of opposition chart, and we'll get into that. Probably could get this class started in January. But right here, square of opposition, and all S or P, no S or P, some S or P, some S or not P. And all going to law is sinful, is contradicted by some going to law are not sinful. Well, I claim that probating a will is not sinful. I claim that getting a divorce is not sinful if you got scriptural grounds. And so that would contradict the claim that all of going to law is sinful. No going to law is sinful is not obviously not true, because this passage is telling us there has to be some. So here we know some is sinful, but we know that some is not sinful, and this can be true. Both can be true. They're subcontraries. It cannot both be false, but they can both be true, and I believe in this case they are. Some going to law is sinful, some's not. So we have to figure out what it is. I think we've already figured out one of the things is that this going to law here, if it is something the church could have handled, it shouldn't have gone to the courts. Does that make sense? But if it's something the church cannot handle, could not handle, then you have to leave it to Caesar, okay, to decide it, like probating a will or something like that. And you are suing the whole world when you do that. And you're suing, if your mate was a member of the church but was unfaithful, you're suing a fellow Christian for divorce. And I believe you have the right to do that. Okay. Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. So we have to now look at this from a standpoint of, okay, so what is lawful, what was going on here, and what was he telling them not to do and to quit doing? Any questions or comments? Look here. Here's some decisions I believe are reserved to Caesar. May a Christian sue a corporation that has stockholders that are members of the Lord's church, for example? Right? If this is not in the middle voice, and so it's either middle or passive, because remember the present tense have the middle and passive have the same form. And so the middle is the oldest. It was the original. The passive kind of came out of it. And so if this is the middle voice, Paul is shaming or he's rebuking the ones who were being sued if it's not the middle voice. But if it's the middle voice, he's shaming or rebuking the ones doing the suing. And I think that has to be the case if it's middle voice. Right? But it can't be both. Now here, all the information about the middle voice, you have all that, so we're not going to go through it. We're going to go through it here so anyone on the internet can stop and read what we have here, okay? I claim it must be the middle voice, and that means it's a self-centered action, because it'd be out of order for Paul rebuking or shaming the victim in the lawsuit, one being sued, but not the one suing. He you can't be rebuking both of them because it can't be both middle and passive at the same time. Okay. Any question there? And this should have a parentheses right there. Right. Okay, I'll go down now. I'm trying to say that they're a certain one, and this is tease. It's a certain one of you singling out. I think there's one person doing this. I don't think it's a whole bunch of people. I think it's one person having a matter against the other, and the other I've translated and footnoted here is another of a different nature because it's heteros. To go to law before the unrighteous, not before the saints. So now we know something about this. It appears here that this person is of a different nature. It's heteros. So let's take verse 2 now, and we'll keep laying more information. We'll keep summarizing. We'll wrap back on it, get it again. I don't know who read it first last time. So Jerry, could you?
James did.
Okay.
Okay. Uk, oidate, hoti, oi, hagoi, hagioi, tone, cosmon, krinusen, kai, a, in, humin, krinetai, ho, cosmos, ana, si, oi, st, Crete, Rion, Ilak, Piston. I don't know where the emphasis is. It didn't print on mine.
It's on the
And I can't read that up there.
Piston.
And I put down, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if by you the world is judged, are, and I added you, unworthy of the least judgments.
All right. I want you to, any comments there, Jerry? I'm going to highlight 3 words. And uk, oidate, hoti. These 3 words are found about 15 or so times in the New Testament. They're always giving an argument why you should do something every time. And all the times except one, it's exactly this form. The other time, it's instead of oidate plural, in other words, second person plural, it's second person singular. And it's when Pontius Pilate is telling Jesus something, making a point, an argument to Jesus that Jesus ought to do something. Okay, so it's found one time, and I have a list here in the text here, and so of all the passages where this expression is found, and it's actually because of the way it's worded. It's got oidate, that's perfect tense. You know, and you have past knowledge, and you still know, do you not, that, and then he's making his argument. This is his first argument why they should not be going to law against others. Here's the first argument. Now here's on the screen is a list of all the passages where this is found. I'm going to send this to you because I've made some pretty good changes in the text of 1 Corinthians. I'll send the text to you fellas tonight after I get home. Okay. So don't you know that the saints, our first argument is the saints shall judge, they shall judge the world. Boy, that's a hard question. How, in what sense are we going to judge the world? And it's in the future tense. Let's go back and look at it. Shall judge is future tense in active voice. All right. we could judge, and I'm claiming here it's possible we might judge by the doctrine that we teach, the truth that we teach. The world will be judged, John 12:48, by the words of Jesus. So as we teach it, then it's possible that the world may be judged by that means. It's also possible that our faithful lives may be showing to the world that it's possible to live in such a way as to please God. And so that's a possibility. Is it not possible that both of them might be involved? And there certainly might be some other thing that we might be involved in the judgment somehow, but I don't see any biblical evidence for it. So I take it probably to be that we're going to judge them by what we've taught and how we've lived. A combination. That's my conclusion. Again, this is one of those things that I'm a little bit. I don't have any further evidence, unless you have some. I don't have anything to add to it. Okay. Now I give the passages. Jeremiah 1:10 and Jeremiah and John 12:48 are going to be judged by the word that Jesus spoke. And then, of course, Romans 2:27 as well. We put all those together. Okay. Now,
There are the passages that talk about how we will reign with him, which kind of are mysterious to me. But I wonder if that same idea, how we will reign with him, maybe there is some sense in which we will judge these people.
yes, I didn't know you had come in. Okay, good.
I'm late, sorry.
That's all right. All right, that's mad, isn't it? It's mad,
Yes, sir.
isn't it? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Okay. We'll have you to read after Chris reads. All right. But what we have here is repeat what you were saying now about us judging.
Well, yeah, you're saying about this judging, are we not to judge the world? Like, what does that mean? And you talked about some ideas, like maybe it's because of the word we teach. But I was wondering that the passages that, like in 1 Timothy 2:12 and Revelation 20 verse 6, where it refers to, the saints reigning with him like a king or whatever. I don't really understand exactly what that means, but I wonder if perhaps in the same way that whatever it means that we would reign with him, that maybe we're involved in judging with him.
Well, that's possible. Again, we don't have any extra biblical evidence, for it. And so it's a possibility, I would say. And we don't know what it is, but I certainly don't feel qualified to set in judgment of people. I think that I could apply the scriptures, but
I don't feel qualified to reign with him either, but it
Yeah.
says, so it's a mystery to me, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
yeah. Well, I know the apostles would sit on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And I've always taken that to be that they judged them through the word that they taught. That's how I've taught it. I've always thought it was. And that's been my interpretation of it. Again, this is one of those things that I'm not sure we have a good answer for it. That makes sense? And,
yeah.
Okay, anything else you want to add there? And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying I don't know. It's one of those things.
I'm saying I don't know too. I just wanted to throw that in there as a data point to think about. That's
okay. All right. And if the world shall be judged, now this is a first-class conditional sentence. If the world is judged, and that's probably a passive voice, by you, that's probably an instrumental case, most likely. And if this were translated as an instrumental case, it could be that the world was judged by means of something that the church had done, either by doctrine or by example, or perhaps by the doctrine taught by Christians, for example. Or, it still could be that we're involved in that and actually involved in the judging somehow. So that's entirely possible. But I don't I don't have to find any scripture that would help me to explain it further than the explanation I've given. I don't have any biblical evidence that will judge the world on the day of judgment, any manner. But I know the doctrine we teach, if we teach the truth, will be the standard by which the world is judged. And of course, they won't be able to say, you know, it wasn't possible to live right if there's faithful children of God that have been forgiven. This is in the future tense. So it would fit it being the day of judgment. That goes along, Matt, with what you're saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it could go along with just the standard of the scriptures that we've been teaching as well. Some will condemn others by their example, and here's some passages that I give for that. All right, right here. So that there are some that do that, and that's on the bottom of the screen right now. Matthew 12, 41 through 42, and Luke 11, 31, 32, and Romans 2:27. Go further. Are you unworthy? Are you unqualified, see, to judge? And now, this is to set it on the bench as a judge, basically, in smallest matters. So now, wait a second. We find one here, one of these interesting things. In the advanced Greek, now Chris is in that. We have the superlative degree right here, and we have the superlative degree of mikros. That's this istos, and so that's superlative of mikros, and so this, what we learned from this is that this is a very small matter. It's not something real big. And it might be small just because it has to do with the world, not spiritual matters. So that might be the case. And here's the use of that word in other passages. Here's other passages where it's found. But it is a superlative degree of micro. The word micro comes from it. Now there's a related word right here. It's found in Ephesians 3:8. Whatever these matters were, they were the smallest matters. So now we've learned more about it. The people involved were different heteros than one another. And it was matters that the church had the authority to decide that he's talking about. It's evident that there's something about these matters that was small. It's possible it's small because it's related to the world rather than spiritual matters. But it's probably small things relating to the world. And the word that's used here for a judge is a tribunal, a court of justice. Moulton and Milligan tell us, right? And so right here, this is praetorium, and it's just a proofstone or a judgment, okay? Now let's look further. Here are the places that's found that might help a bit, looking at it in the Septuagint, in Exodus 21:6 here right on the top of the screen. There is a textual version, 1 Kings 7:44. Some manuscripts have this word, some don't. Let's look at a couple of those passages right quick. That his master shall bring him unto the judges, and he shall also bring him to the door, and under the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and shall serve him forever. This is a servant that chooses to serve his master all his life. And so the judges here, this is a small court. It's not a big court. Okay? And here, these are some of the sons of one of the judges that sit in judgment. So there's different levels of judgment. This was a smaller, and the eon ending is usually a suffix which carries the idea of something small, okay, diminutive form. It's a tribunal lawsuit, and of course, according to Bolton, Volume 2 is right here. Now, I took Uk Odate Hote and said, you know, don't you? Because he's expecting a yes answer. You know, don't you, that the saints shall judge the world. So that's our first reason to back away from it. The argument why they shouldn't be doing what they were doing. The world is judged for you, we're the smallest tribunals. That's how I translated it. And then I footnoted the tribunals are you unwilling to judge the smallest matters. Okay? That way the readers can get to other options. All right? Any questions? Now we've learned two things already about it, or three now. It's a small matter, something the church could decide, and there was a difference, some kind of difference between the ones who were actually suing and the ones being sued. And it's a qualitative, some kind of difference there. All right. Could you read the next one for us, Matt, please?
Yeah, verse 3.
Please.
Okay. Uk oidate hati angelus krinumen mete ge biotica. And I have it's a translation. Don't you all know that we will judge angels? Why not even daily life or things of daily life, everyday things?
Everyday things. Okay. And it's the same expression. And what I'm claiming is this is the second reason why they shouldn't be doing it. Because we're going to judge the world and then we're going to judge angels. I would assume that the angels here we're judging probably are angels that have fallen. Again, it's an assumption. I don't know whether it's true or not, but what do y'all think?
It's no way someone I can see, but with the information we have.
So, Matt, any comment there about what you think about that?
I mean, it's mysterious to me, but I guess I could kind of lump it in parallel with the previous verse that there's going to be some judging we're going to find ourselves surprised to be doing at some point, judging the world and judging angels, whatever that means.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things, they apparently knew it, but perhaps we're missing something in our study of the scriptures somehow. I don't know how we're missing it, but we're missing something. But my conclusion is we judge by the doctrine we teach and by our examples. That's maybe a cop-out, though, because I can't find any other evidence. I see this as Paul's second argument why they should not be going to law against others. We shall judge, and again, that's future tense, and that would go along with the judgment day. But my explanation to fit in there as well.
This is a big thing in contrast to the little things, too.
And what he's doing is, this is a second a fortiori argument. Now, the a fortiori argument is this: what's true of the lesser is true of the greater, right? And what's not true of the greater is not true of the lesser by process of logic. So we can reverse it, negate them and reverse them. Right? Basically, it's similar to the De Morgan's theorem of logic. So what we have here, the a fortiori argument is if angels are greater than us, or if angels are judging angels is greater than judging small matters, and we're not to judge angels, and we're not to judge not forbidden to judge smaller matters, but not forbidden to judge angels. And so we'd have to frame it in that form. Might be Romans 2:27 again. How much more, say, things pertaining to this life? Since angels are greater than things pertaining to this life, we're not forbidden to judge angels, then we are not forbidden to judge the things that pertain to this life. So he's saying the church can judge these things. So again, I'm arguing whatever this is, it's something the church can judge. And what's true of the lesser is true of the greater. Now, that principle, and I'm going to go through it quickly because Matthew had been in some of my other classes. The a fortiori principle, what's true of the lesser is true of the greater, is a principle that Jesus used whenever they challenged him for healing on the Sabbath, and he said, you'll take care of your sheep that's in a pit or a ditch, or you take your oxen or your ass or your animal and take it and feed it and give it water on the Sabbath. And if you can do that for the animals, I can heal the people, a person, because a person is greater than an animal. So what's true of the lesser is true of the greater. And the book of Hebrews is filled with that. What's true of the law of Moses in principle would be true of the New Testament system. And so you have to have that principle to really understand the book of Hebrews, I believe. That's the a fortiori. What's true of the lesser is true of the greater. What's not true of the greater is not true of the lesser. Now then, the biotica is, according to Robertson's word pictures, it's related to business matters, right? It's from bios rather than zoe. And so these are not church doctrine. So again, we learned something else about this. They weren't taking church doctrine before the world, right? Or matters relating to the church. They're not spiritual matters. So they're things relating to this life, right? So what we find here, now we know 4 things about it. The ones being suited or different in some manner. I think we're going to have to develop that as we go through. Then the ones doing the suing, they were self-centered in their suing, and we argued that from it being middle voice, the ones doing the suing were on the part of the ones doing the suing, because it can't be both middle voice and passive at the same time. So it has to be referring to either the one doing the suing or the one being sued. And it makes perfectly good sense for it to be the ones doing the suing that is rebuking. And they're the smallest matters, verse 2, and they're things pertaining to this life. And so we got 4 things now. And of course, the following verses will reveal more about these matters. So now we know 4 things about it. That people are different and self-centered on the part of the one doing the suing. It's a small matter, maybe small because it has to do with the world rather than spiritual things. And it relates to the world, not to spiritual matters. Any questions? All right. I translated, don't you? It's a rhetorical question that we shall judge angels, how much more things pertain to this life. All right. Now, Jerry, could you read verse?
You skipped Chris.
Chris, skip you, Chris.
That's all right.
All right, we'll go back to you. Okay.
All right. Verse 4.
Verse 4. Thank you.
Biotica men criteria eon exete tous exouthenomenos en te ecclesia tutos kath ezete. I have, so if indeed you have judgments judge the things of this life, set them up, the ones being despised in the church.
The American Standard has this as a question. King James has it as a statement. This is one of the places we have a little bit of trouble with it. It is in the imperative mood. And so if then, and it's a 3rd class condition. So if this happens, you have to judge, you make these judgments, things pertaining to this life, biotica. And so that's accusative plural. So these are things relating to this life, not spiritual matters. See, church problems before the court. Do you set? And here we get into it. And I've got the American Standard as a question: do you set them to judge? And the King James says, set them to judge. And it is the imperative mood. Okay.
I think it's not a question. Personally, I think because of the next verse, he's pointing out, demonstrating to them how foolish they're being by stating that even the ones who are least esteemed in the assembly should be able to handle that. Or, you know, it's that small a matter, and so there should be then a wise person who could handle it for sure. If the least person should be able to handle it in the church. That's what I took it anyway.
Well, if it's a commandment, he's telling them to set those of no account in the church. It could be
Or least esteemed.
least esteemed in the church, if it's a commandment. If it's not a commandment, it may be a question then. Do you set them to judge? Right?
Well, I didn't take that way because they're not judging, they're taking it to law.
Yeah.
So they weren't exercising that one. So I thought it had to be the other one.
Well, the argument that the American Standard is making, basically, their interpretation of it, with it being the a statement, a question, what they're claiming is that it's, and they're taking it to be an argument, basically. Would you do that? Would you take the least in the church to make these judgment on that? Would you pick the least in the church? Or the least in the church is greater than the worst in the world, best in the world. And so, again, it's another a fortiori argument. That's the claim. That's the, and again, I'm at a quandary as to which one's right, the King James or American Standard. That's what quandary I get into here.
Well, I guess I have a question. Is those who have no account in the church, or however we say it, are we talking about just like lowly church members or people in the church that aren't any good or whatever? Or are we're talking about the outsiders? They're the ones like the law courts. Wouldn't they be the ones that have no standing in the church?
No, I think it's who have no account, the ones that are treated with contempt in the church. This probably would be someone in the church that maybe is not very knowledgeable, maybe a new convert. I'd rather have a new convert that I knew had sincerely obeyed the gospel to make a decision for me than someone in the world. And so that's how I'm seeing it here. I don't know.
I guess I just looked up that word, the exuthan name menus, and it just sounded like really, really bad. Disdain, reject, scorn. I mean, are there members? Are there members of the church we're describing that way? Is that just like new members of the church? We're not despising them.
Well, he does say they're in the church, though.
Or maybe that's by the church. They're despised by the church.
Well, that's another interpretation. Because if it was an instrumental case, it would be by the church.
Which changes my whole outlook at the verse.
That would affect it. That would go along with what you're saying there. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we translate it as instead of locative, as we translate it as, let's see how the King James American Standard, I think they both translated it as locative. Account in the church, but it could be least esteemed by the church, because in Epsilon Nu could be the instrumental case. And so that would be, these people are least esteemed by the church. They're people in the world. And so the question is, do you choose that kind of person to make your judgment? Well, you go out to the courts of the world, that's the kind of people you're getting. You're getting some people that are not very good a lot of times.
And I'm probably influenced by the English Standard Version on this one. It says, so if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? And I guess that I've read that before, and it's made me think that's talking about these secular courts, perhaps.
Well, it could be. I've always interpreted it to be the least person in the church themselves, because but I've taken it to be in, and I've not even looked at it from the standpoint of the instrumental case. Right? I'm going to have to go back and rework that rascal, at least put that down as a possible interpretation. So what I did is I made it an a fortiori argument. And I say, if you do not use the least esteemed in the church, you are greater than those in the world to judge, and we should not use those in the world to judge. So that was the argument that I interpreted to be. We wouldn't take the least in the church to do it, to make a judgment. We would take the least in the church to be a judgment, to be making judgments. But so the people in the world are less than them. But again, you go back to the meaning of that word as you pointed out there, Matt. Okay. Any comments? Further comments? Anybody? So I'm going to go back and rework my notes on this. All right. As a learning experience for me. Okay. If indeed, therefore, you have a tribunal of things pertaining to this life, do you set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church? That's how I translated it. Right? And we could least esteemed by the church would be the other option. Okay. All right, let's see if we get one more verse. All right. Yeah, whose turn is it?
You did last one, so do you mind? Pros, intro, pain, human, bego, hutos, hook. That didn't print out good. What's the next one? Oh, yeah. Any, in, human, sophos, hude, ace, os, dune, setai, diakrinai, ana, meson, tu, adelphu, hatu. And I put, I speak to your shame in this matter. Is there not even one wise among you who shall be able to judge between a brother and his brother? United brother.
Can't you find one among you? That's why I've gone with him having the earlier verse to be a least brother in the church. That's how I've always interpreted it. But again, I want to change my notes on it. Can't you find someone who can make a decision?
And I thought he was just getting on them because they're not doing that. So did you not even have one person you could have gone to in the church, and you chose to go to court?
Yeah. That was my conclusion. That's what he's saying, I think. And you're able to decide, has the ability to decide between, rather make the decision in this matter. Again, he's referring to a Christian here, a one wise man. This is going to be decided between brethren. I think this has to be a fellow Christian. Cannot we find one member of the church who can decide these matters, who has enough wisdom to make the decisions? You have to go to the world, go to law before a judge that's a worldly person. I think we've learned 5 things about these matters, and then we'll close out for the night. The one being sued are different. The ones being sued and the ones being sued, doing the suing and being sued are different in some manner, heteron. And there's this, it's almost certainly the middle voice, probably self-centered action on the part of the one doing the suing. These were the smallest matters, and they relate to this life. And they're matters wherein they were going to law were matters that the church had authority to judge. So we have to put these factors in the back of our mind before we decide what this is all about. Okay, this is our end of our class for tonight. Do you have any questions? I translated it here. I speak to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you, not even one that shall be able to judge between his brethren?
I had a question about why do you think brother is singular in the Greek there?
Well,
Because it was a certain one was singular
I think that,
to start with.
yeah, the decision here, we got a certain one, probably one person involved in this. And he's deciding between the brother of him.
It went back to a previous verse.
Maybe between brother and brother.
Yeah.
Maybe an idiom between brother and brother.
That was what I was trying to translate it singular and it was messy. I see you have it plural as well, brethren.
Yeah. I think it'd be an idiom, probably.
Okay.
Between brethren or between brother, one brother and another.
Or between him and his brother, maybe
Yeah.
if we really try to make it singular.
Yeah. That's a good question. Well, let's start with verse 6 next week. And right. We have brother against brother. Okay. Right. Any questions?